I spent the first 18 years of my life going to one of the best schools in India. I then spent the next 4 years of my life going to one of the best universities in the world for artificial intelligence. The year following my graduation, I was endorsed as one of only 20 students to start a business in the UK, which would have been based on new technology, which would have been government funded, and which would have done for opportunities what the internet did for information. And so it would have been a concrete solution to current unemployment crisis and global recession. But then, 2 years since, I find myself in a house arrest with almost no human contact and deprived of most of the pleasures of life. So, what happened to me, right? How can someone go from this peak state to almost nothing for a prolonged period of time and still survive? Well, I guess I have one hell of a story to tell you. And so, the story really starts from uh, my time at high school. So, I was born into a family where my mother was studying to be a cancer researcher when my father was setting up his businesses when I was born. And although I did not know it at the time, I grew up in the middle of five failed business ventures, the last of which happened during my time at university. And so growing up, my family was asset rich, cash flow rich, but I never felt rich, right? Because a lot of the money was going up to recuperate for the losses. And so I was always that weird kid who never really fit in with my peers in high school. And to add to that, I grew up very protected and very sheltered. Um, and so that kind of led me to become majorly depressed at an early age. And at around 2008, I was almost at the verge of suicide when something shifted within me, and a lot of my focus and anger went towards disproving the existence of God using science. And that launched me on a self directed parallel learning trajectory where I just felt like I was on fire whenever I was learning about these things and reading about these topics and just trying to figure out uh, the entire kind of tech industry and the entire scientific world and how all of that worked, right? And so quite so during that phase, like during that phase of high school, I could clearly see that AI was the future and that that's exactly what I wanted to pursue as an undergraduate degree. And I could also see that we as a species are heading towards an extinction event, and see the extinction or evolution. And the way towards evolution is by solving intelligence and by merging with something higher than us. So during that time, I also heard this kind of voice in my head which said that you need to master human to go beyond it. And at that time, I didn't think much of it. But then, come graduation, right? Come my time at university, I did a lot of cool things, right? I gave like TED Talks. I learned how to glide. I was into ballroom dancing. I met with celebrities. I met with like a whole bunch of people from all stratas of society, like from women who were flying around in private planes, modeling in Vogue, to, strippers and buskers and everyone, basically. And towards the end of my time there, I also had my first part-time work as an intern for the Scottish Institute of Enterprise. And so I had to promote entrepreneurship in all five universities in the city. And I used that as a stepping stone towards building ENSA, which was an entrepreneurship society, which I then started from nothing with my friends, who had established a society and were onto it even before I entered the game. And so with their help, and with whatever contribution I could make, we scaled it to becoming one of the most successful and fastest growing societies on campus. And by then, I was kind of very into the entire entrepreneurial network in the UK, and so I was in a good position to pull off building this business. And in addition to that, there was uh, the whole kind of obsession with science, AI, tech, and all of that. That just I kept that alive throughout my time at uni, and I just used university as kind of like a subscription service to figure out what my greatest possible contribution to the world should be. Uh, but when I graduated, my plan was that I would get match funding from back home, I'd get government funding, and then I would assemble a team around me, and then I would validate my market, and then I would just take it from there. But then during the first year, I was already encountering a lot of difficulty from back home, uh, regarding the match funding, right? And in addition to that, I realized that throughout my time in education, because I was always so reluctant and resistant to what was being taught to me, because I had such a strong sense of purpose and direction, um, of my own, that I ended up throwing out the baby with the bathwater, right? So I ended up missing out on some core skills like self-discipline, time management, money management, and being able to put in like the 10,000 hours which people need to become like great at something, right? And to be able to experiment a lot, right? So I'd missed out on a lot of these things, and that was like something which was completely frozen me, right? And to add to that, I felt like life was just coming at me from all directions. And so during that time, I also had like a very deep spiritual experience, which was kind of a continuation of hearing that voice in your head, um, which until later on, I realized was um, something which has been well documented even before I've stumbled upon it. And so that year was really spent waiting for funding and dealing with my own shortcomings, and I was in a very bad position at that time. And so from there, the climax happened when my grandfather passed away, and I was forced to come back to India. And as soon as I came back here, I tried to build a dropshipping business to take me back to the UK so that I could finish my work, right? I'm not the kind of guy who begs people, right? But at that point, I was like literally telling my friends, like, buy this wolf mug and buy this wolf bed sheet, because, I need it, because I need to come back, because, this is important. This is super important because we're heading towards this financial meltdown, and someone needs to do something about it. And even if you become rich, and even if you become well, even if you have all the things which you're supposed to have and you're chasing after actively, it might not be worth anything if the currency collapses and there's social upheaval, and you can't even enjoy any of it because you have to work 24/7 non-stop just to make up for the global debt burden which has been propelled onto our generation, right? But people don't want to listen to that, right? So most people gave me the cold shoulder, turned a blind eye against me, labeled me as a lunatic. I ended up getting kicked out of a lot of communities as well. So I lost like almost all of my friends, right? None of them had wanted to have to do anything with me because I had fallen into, trouble. I had fallen inside the belly of the whale, right? So I was doing well, and then something from underneath just came and grabbed me. Uh, and then I found myself in a very kind of downtrodden and really like tattered up state. And during that time, I had two options. Right, the first one was to go and get immediate employment and immediately get myself out of this mess. Right, um, but the second one was to kind of take the trajectory which I was propelled on, which I put together over the course of my 4 years at uni, and to just stay course, right? To just to stay put and to just figure out a way to get to my destination, regardless of what I have at my disposal. And so a sane person would choose the former, uh, but I chose the latter, and I decided to suffer, literally like suffer in silence for so many years, because I could imagine that, okay, in the first kind of line, I have these kind of AI skills. I have these business skills. I could take like any company and turn it into like a cybernetic superorganism, so that it would obliterate its competitors. Corner its market and explode its margins, and then become a rich millionaire as a consequence of that. Um, in a world where millionaires would be hunted, in a world where income inequality would go through the roof, in a world where I wouldn't be um, happy to bring children in or to start a family in, right? In that kind of a world, what's the point of being wealthy and rich when you can't do anything? And and so yeah, I ended up really like putting myself in a very tight position where I realized that I can no longer depend on my family to support me, where I'd lost all of my friends, and where I'd basically been abandoned and left for dead by people who I thought were family. Um, and um, and at that point, it was like it was really like quite hard on me. But then what I did over the course of the next year was to take all of that mental pain, all of that mental suffering, and obliterate it completely out of my system. Right? And so I moved towards this state of consciousness called a unified mind. And that's a state of mind that's free from all forms of internal conflict, all forms of suffering, and is kind of a complete release of the energy which gets trapped in by destructive thinking, right? And so I ended up unifying my mind, free up all of this mental energy, and in a way breaking out of the karmic matrix which I was born into, right? And then now launching myself on this new karmic trajectory as an internet entrepreneur, through which I then hope to sort of go back to that point in which I can now, finally build that business which I'd set out to build, which I feel is so important for the world right now, and which only I kind of can can understand at this point, right? Um, so yeah, it was pretty kind of harsh downfall, and from here, I hope that I can you know get it all back. I hope that I can really make up for all of this lost time, and that's basically what I'm fighting towards right now. And um, and and that's primarily what I wanted to share with you. That's the enthusiasm which has kept me alive and kept me going. And so, if I want to leave you with a message, I would say that regardless of how hard things get, if what you're doing is worth doing, and you see something which other people don't but should, then don't feel held back with pursuing that calling, right? Because at the end of the day, that's the kind of calling which saves you. That's the kind of calling which um, our world is built on fundamentally. Because if it wasn't for people like me, it wasn't for people who were like the crazy ones who would pay the price for something great to come into this world, we would still be living in the jungle, right? We would still be, you know, hunters and gatherers, right? We would never reach the kind of complexity which we have reached as a species. And that pathway is not easy, it's very hard. And you cannot walk on it just based on willpower. You can only walk on it based on the spirit which sort of animates you to walk through and across these gates. So yeah, that's the message which I wanted to leave you with.